Okay, hi everybody. Thanks for joining tonight for another edition of the Learn to Skip series, off-ice strategy sessions. This is part 2 of undetermined number of sessions. There was one of these that was held about a year ago now, and the recording of that session can be found on YouTube. We will review some of the topics that were covered last year. But before we get to that, I'm just going to make a few intro comments and kind of set the stage here with some assumptions. So I'm approaching this from the perspective that we're assuming that the team that we're talking about is competitive, or at least what I would consider serious. So the team is interested in working together to try to win games. So that may or may not be the case for example, teams that are playing in league at any given time, that are, they're out there to have fun, not that they're trying to lose. But the point is to go out, throw rocks, have a good time, and go hang out at Stanley's, hang out at the bar afterwards. And they may not be putting in like the same amount of effort to work together as a team that I would consider competitive or serious. So we're also going to assume that routine shots are likely to be made. So for example, open hits should be made like 80% of the time. We're going to assume that like those kind of things are going to be, those kind of shots from the opposition and for your own team are going to be made. And what I would consider routine draws are also likely to be made. So I think at our level, like a draw to the 8-foot is not unreasonable to make most of the time. A draw to the 4-foot is, maybe 50% of the time if we're feeling good. So the series is called Learn to Skip, but some people have been skipping, some people have not been skipping. Whether you're a skip or not, or whether your aspirations are to be a skip or not, I don't really think it matters. I think that if you have an understanding of strategy, it's going to make a player better no matter what position you play. For some reason, we just kicked out of slideshow mode. Do people still hear me?
Yes, you're still good, Jeremy.
Okay, cool. Okay, and finally, we're going to assume that the ice conditions are good when we're talking about strategy here. So this may or may not be the case that we have that we see on our ice in league, so you may have to adjust some of the like specifics for the ice that we play on. But that doesn't mean that we can't take some concepts from this discussion and apply it to our sometimes crazy ice conditions. Okay, so a quick review from the previous session. So we talked a lot about, in that session, we talked a lot about game plans and end plans. And these can be sort of difficult if you're just starting to think about how to be a skip, and it might be a little bit daunting to think about like what is going to be my game plan. But it doesn't have to be something complicated. This should just sort of be like your general approach to the game that's going to best suit your team. So you might know that your team is like very good hitters, or they are weaker hitters, and maybe they're better at throwing draws. And so you are going to tailor your entire strategy around that. Or maybe you know that your opposition really likes to play a ton of hits, so you're going to try to clog things up, throw a ton of guards, and make them hit their way out of situations. And if they make a mistake, you'll be able to capitalize. So I wouldn't get too hung up on game plans. Try to keep it simple and just think about what your team does well in particular. More important is to have an end plan. So every time you start playing an end, you should start thinking about what is my goal for the end. am I really trying to score? And if I'm trying to score, how many do I need to score for this to be to put my team in a position to win? Maybe I don't need to score. Maybe I just need to like get through this end and don't let the opposition claw their way back into it. So either I can, force them to score 1 point and prevent them from scoring a bunch of points, or maybe I'm willing to, if I have hammer, maybe I'm willing to take 1 point and just, again, get closer to the end of the game. So based on that, you're going to have a tolerance for risk, and you will decide how aggressive you want to play that end. And you can think of this as a chart of outcomes, as like things we want to achieve, things we're willing to accept from this end, and things that we absolutely have to avoid. This is a concept that Gabrielle Coleman talks a lot about in her Intro to Strategy book, which I highly recommend. I will refer to that book again at the end of the session. Okay, so those are kind of strategic considerations, which are higher level thinking. But when you get to be playing as a skip, you are probably also going to want to think about tactics, which are the specific shots that you're going to call. And in the first session, we came up with a series of kind of rules of thumb for tactics. And I find that if you have a good understanding, at least this helps me, having a good understanding of these rules of thumb gives me a lot of just sort of narrows down the options for what I can do when I'm playing the game, and it just gives me a framework for how I'm going to approach a number of situations. So just running through these rules of thumb. So in general, the non-hammer team will prefer to play in the center of the sheet. So if they play in the center of the sheet, they're going to increase the chances of a steal, which is almost all situations is good for the non-hammer team. And it's also going to keep the scoring area small. And if the scoring area is small, it's going to be difficult for the hammer team to score multiple points. Remember that the hammer team is most often going to be trying to score more than one. So if we can prevent them from scoring more than one, we should be happy as the non-hammer team. Okay, second point. The hammer team will prefer to play on the wings. So if they can avoid playing in the center, they will try to do that. This has a couple of consequences. So first of all, if all the play is on the wings, even if they maybe when it comes time for the skip to throw the hammer, if all the play is on the wings and there's a big scoring area, it will be easy for the skip to make that bailout shot and score 1 point and prevent the non-hammer team from stealing a bunch of points. The second point here is that if you have a large scoring area, it makes it easy for you as the hammer team to score a bunch of points. And like maybe if the non-hammer team is sitting 1, but you have a ton of little biters around the edges, if you can hit that shot rock, you can score a bundle of points. So the hammer team is going to prefer to play on the wings. Next is both teams would prefer to play in front of the tee line. So if the rocks are in front of the tee line, they can get closer to the button. But as soon as they go behind the tee line, they can only get further from the button. So you can always you can advance those stones. Those stones are dangerous that are in front of the tee line, and usually teams have to deal with them. If you're playing behind the tee line, there are situations where the opponent can use your stones against you, or if you see your opponent's stones behind the tee line, you can take advantage of that. And that's one of my favorite things to do as a skip. Next, the more rocks that are in play, the more likely it is that a big score is going to occur. So it doesn't matter what color those rocks are. If there's more rocks in play, it's going to be easier to keep even more rocks in play. And the more rocks that are in play, the more likely it is that somebody is going to score 2 or 3 or more. So having rocks in play is an advantage to the losing team. This is a case where the losing team can use their opponent's stones against them to try to get back into the game. Next is that the bigger the scoring area, the more likely it is that a big score will occur. We've sort of already talked about this. So this usually favors the hammer team, but in the case where the non-hammer team is down by a lot of points, they might opt to have a lot of rocks in play, maybe not in the middle of the sheet, and then sort of hope for a miss from the skip, or try to clog things up in a way that prevents the hammer team from throwing a draw and out counting all the non-hammer team's rocks. I think this next point is a big one, and I think people often get it confused. So I'll probably reiterate this many times as we talk here tonight. Draws are aggressive and hits are conservative. So if you are trying to play offensive and score points, you want more rocks in play. The way that you get more rocks in play is to throw a draw. If you are trying to play conservatively, if you're trying to play defensively, you want to have fewer rocks in play. Doesn't matter even what color those rocks are. You may be wanting to hit and remove rocks from play, and that will make it easier to remove subsequent rocks from play. So huge point here that draws are aggressive and hits are conservative. Now, those are all nice rules of thumb. But one overriding principle to everything is that you want to have a tactical plan that your team can execute. That basically means you want to make sure that you're calling shots that your team can make. If you're trying to call shots that you know that your teammate is going to miss, you are not going to be putting yourself into a better position. Okay, so with all that said, we're going to start to talk about tactical plans, and this kind of boils down to most of the discussion about tactical plans boils down to how to start the end. After we throw a bunch of rocks, there's an infinite number of variations to where those rocks could be, and it's difficult to give kind of specific recommendations about what to do once you're halfway through an end and you're in a position that nobody's ever seen before. However, the ends, they always start the same way. There's no rocks in play, and we know exactly who's going to be throwing the first rock, who's going to be throwing the second rock, and on and on and on. So every end starts the same way, and so we can have a plan for exactly how we're going to start the end. So the difference is, the only real difference when we approach an end are the score, the end, like the end number, like how far along through the game are we, and of course, who has the hammer. So based on those factors, we can start to determine an end plan. So, and just as a reminder, kind of like the common end plans would be, if you're non-hammer, might be like we need to steal more than one, or we want to steal one, or we will try to force the hammer team to take a point. Or if we have a hammer, the end plans might be score one, score two, score more than two, might be blank. I think we're going to, for the most part, we're going to ignore the blank situation. Although if anybody has any questions about blanking strategy, please feel free to ask. So based on those factors, most serious and competitive teams will have a plan for what they're going to do with their lead stones. Okay, so that's going to be based on the score, end, and hammer, and this will adjust how aggressive or conservative they want to be. I'm going to point out a few terms that you might hear if you are kind of looking around the internet or you go to clinics. You might sometimes hear as these approaches as protecting. So protecting would be a conservative defense first strategy to avoid giving up points. Pursuing is the opposite of protecting. So that's aggressive offense first strategy where you're trying to score points. And then there's a middle of the road approach which would be called probing. And this is kind of allowing the end to develop and with a balanced approach, and it allows the skip to change to a more protecting or more pursuing approach as the end develops. So in particular, if you watch Jamie Sinclair's videos on YouTube about strategy, she will use these terms of protecting, pursuing, and probing. If you go to a Kevin Martin clinic, he will use these terms: protecting, pursuing, probing, and he'll break down probing into probing plus and probing minus, meaning like we have a probing strategy, but if we're plus, then we're more likely to go pursuing, like we're looking for an opportunity to become pursuing. And probing minus would be we're going to be more defensive. We're going to be probing right now, but at the first sign of trouble, we're going to try to get out of it. So, okay. So with that said, I'm going to stop sharing the slideshow, and I'm going to switch over to a different tab, which is curling GGs. Is that working?
Yes.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so I'm mostly going to not use the protecting, probing, and pursuing terminology. I usually think in terms of conservative, most conservative, moderately conservative, balanced, or like kind of neutral, and then aggressive and very, very, very aggressive. So we'll start with the situation where without hammer and trying to be very conservative. So the most conservative thing that we can do if we don't have hammer is, and we're throwing the first stone, is throw the rock through. We're not going to put a rock in play at all. We're just not even going to allow the opposition to have something that they can use to score. So that's an extreme situation. But if you watch a bunch of high level curling, you will see teams go ahead and do that, and just especially in the last end of the game, they will throw rocks away. So outside of that, like the kind of very specific situation where you are going to be extremely conservative, the next kind of conservative approach would be to throw a rock on the center line, trying to be in the 4-foot. Remember, we want to be in front of the T line. Non-hammer team is trying to play trying to play toward the center of the sheet, and this is going to give the hammer team an immediate threat to think about. So this rock is going to be difficult to outdraw. So if they are playing anything but an aggressive strategy, they might just elect to hit this rock right away and make sure that they don't get into trouble. Now, I'm going to assume that if we're in a pretty conservative approach, that means that we probably have like the lead in the game, and so the hammer team is going to have to be playing aggressively. So they are probably going to need to throw a guard. So I'll put a guard up here, and now the non-hammer team has the option of doing a couple of different things. And again, this depends on how conservative or aggressive they want to be. So if they want to try to play for a force, they might just throw another rock in the rings. Ideally they would be freezing on the first stone, and now this threat is even more severe for the hammer team. They're starting to really have to worry about giving up 2 points instead of 1, and they might need to start throwing hits. So that's a conservative approach, and what we're sort of banking on is that, again, that the hammer team is going to be playing aggressive, and they might be forced to ignore this to try to set up their own offense. A kind of more aggressive approach, and I think this is I really recommend this kind of strategy for a lot of people at our level, would be to, with their first rock, throw into the rings, try to get a rock in a good position that is difficult for the hammer team, would be difficult for the hammer team to outdraw. And then once that's in place, force the hammer team to figure out, are they going to hit that rock? Are they going to try to hit that rock? Or are they going to ignore it and try to set up their own offense? And so in this case, if we're assuming that maybe yellow is losing and they need to ignore that rock so that they can try to get some rocks behind a guard on the wing, this might be the time to throw a center guard and sort of immediately create this steal threat. One thing I think we talked about in the first session was that really the ideal setup for a steal is where you have a rock that is in a position that's very difficult to outdraw, and that it's hidden behind a guard, so that makes it difficult to hit. So once you're in once you have those two things in place, this is shaping up to be a good steal situation. So those are kind of going to be the options if you're playing on the more conservative side without hammer. So generally, you're going to throw your first stone into the rings, and then depending on what the hammer team does, assuming that the hammer team ignores that rock, your two options are going to be to draw another one tight to the first one, make the hammer team worry about giving up multiple points right away, or try to guard and set up a steal and then force the hammer team to try to generate some offense, even though you're already setting up for a steal. So that's the most conservative, or those are the kind of the conservative options if you're playing without hammer. So let's think about more aggressive options if you're playing without hammer. So let's say you're in a position where you really need to steal a point or multiple points. So in this case, we cannot let the opposition hit any of our rocks. We're trying to score, so we need to have rocks in play. The best way to keep rocks in play, especially with lead stones, is to throw a guard. It kind of doesn't matter where the guard ends up. We would really like it to be on the center line, but it could be a high guard, it could be a tight guard, so it could be like a 1 guard, or it could be a 3 guard. And depending on how aggressive we want to be, let's say that yellow is playing moderately aggressive. Let's see, if this were me playing and I'm playing moderately aggressive, moderately conservative, I'm going to throw a draw to the wing. So now, if red has a decision to make, do they need to try to score desperately, steal desperately, or do they just want to set themselves up for maybe a steal, kind of a situation for a steal of 1? So kind of most commonly, the next thing to do will be to try to draw around that center guard that they set up with their first rock. And oops, undo last shot. So the advantage of this compared to the previous situation is that this allows red to make sure that, assuming they keep that rock out of the rings, and make sure that red has a guard in play to draw behind. In the more conservative approach, they established their rock in the ring first and then covered it up. In this case, of course, in that case, like yellow had the option to hit. In this case, yellow will not be able to hit this rock, right, until after 5 rocks are thrown. So if you're trying to be more aggressive, we're going to throw that guard first and then draw around it. And once we got this is a good position to steal right away. Yellow is going to be, in order to not give up a steal, yellow is probably going to have to try to, the free guard zone time isn't even over yet, so they're going to probably have to try to play into the center. Ideally for them, they might throw a rock like corner frozen on yours. If this is like fully buried, it's going to be hard to even move this rock out of the 4 foot. Maybe if they're lucky, they can push it out into the open. But they are probably going to be best served by maybe even just throwing a freeze and then hoping that they can hit their yellow later. And now red's got shot rock. They got a guard. If they want to like get super just kind of go into guard for your life mode, you can do it right away. Cap this and then make yellow throw a bunch of peels, try to keep removing guards. As long as you can keep throwing guards and capping this, it's a good situation to steal a point. Okay, so let's go back a couple of stones to that decision that red made with their second stone. So that's all well and good to throw one in, but let's say you would need to be even more aggressive. Like this is steal or go home kind of situation. This is a time where you might want to throw a second guard above the first one, and the purpose of this guard is to protect the tight guard. This tight guard is the one that's going to protect any rocks in the rings. If we don't have that, it might be possible for yellow to remove a rock, like even if it's in the 4 foot. So let's say we had, let's go back to this. Let's go back to kind of the start of the end. So let's say we throw our first guard and it's super high, and then yellow throws a rock over there, and we throw our next one into the 4 foot. With so much room here, it may be possible for yellow to play a down weight hit, hack weight hit, something like that, and remove that rock. So that's where having a tight guard is really the one that's going to be protecting rocks in the rings. The high guards are meant to protect the tight guards. So let's even say that, maybe the skip, this is a steal in all cost situation for non-hammer team. Maybe the skip calls for a 3 and they get a 1. That's fine. Yellow again is probably gonna go away from that. They might try to throw a rock into the 4 foot and beat you to the spot. Let's say they even did that. This might be a situation, or this is probably a situation where red, again, if you want to steal, you're going to need a guard somewhere in that 2-3 area. You can just use this one to protect the next one that you're going to throw. Now, this is a dangerous situation for yellow. Red's already got their rocks in play. If they can bump this yellow one back, red is going to be in a very, very good situation. Very good situation to steal. So you can think about throwing the high guard first or second. I kind of prefer to throw the tight one first. It's just easier. You don't have to try to get around the high guard to put this one in place. So it's kind of nice to throw the tight one first and then throw a 1 guard to cap it off. Okay, so that's the most aggressive approach for non-hammer team to try to set up a steal. All right, so we're gonna go to kind of we start thinking about like what the hammer team is trying to do here. So let's think about the most aggressive situation for a hammer team. So again, if we're assuming that the hammer team is trying to play aggressive, or if the hammer team is trying to play aggressive, we're going to assume that means that the non-hammer team is in a pretty good situation. Maybe they don't need to score. They're going to play more conservatively. So we already said that like the conservative approach for non-hammer team, we probably try to throw one toward the button, get one in a position that yellow has to worry about. If they're going to be even more conservative, they might even just throw it all the way through the rings and not give yellow anything to deal with. So the aggressive thing for the hammer team to do here would be to throw a corner guard. So why do they want to throw a corner guard? So remember that so they're trying to play aggressive. They want another rock in play. So number one, they're throwing a rock in play. And then also the guard is going to allow them to keep even more rocks in play if they can draw around that guard and get some things established around the corner guard. And also remember that the hammer team is trying to play to the wings so they can set up a big scoring area. They want to leave this open if they can. So if they play over here, then maybe they'll have a chance for a hit later on to remove this rock and score multiple points. So this does bring up kind of some of the danger for playing aggressively with hammer. Because non-hammer team gets to throw first, you're allowing them to like get a stone into a good position. You're kind of forced to ignore it for some time. So let's say red throws this one in. We're gonna throw a corner guard, and now maybe red draws another one right on top. And now in order to try to set ourselves up for 2 points, we want to play a draw. And if we try to throw a draw behind that corner guard, that's kind of like that could be considered 100% shot made. We're now allowing red to either throw yet a third rock in play, which is a third rock into the rings, which means that we might need to make a triple at some point. We might need to maybe we can make a couple of doubles to get ourselves get all these rocks out of there. But we're going to need to move a lot of granite in order to count this one and then count a second yellow. So playing aggressively with hammer is can be a difficult thing for teams to execute, particularly at the club level where making doubles is not routine, making triples is not routine. So oftentimes it can be difficult to convert those situations if you're forced to play this kind of end setup. The situation might even be more difficult if, say, red, instead of throwing a third one in the rings, let's say they throw a guard, and now yellow needs to somehow get at these rocks, and with this rock in the way, it's gonna be really difficult it's impossible to remove both. It's gonna be difficult to even move these around. So it's sort of already dangerous for yellow. So let's think about what happens if yellow needs to be even more aggressive. So let's say we're in a situation where red is up 3 points or more. Maybe on their first one, they don't even throw it in the rings. They just throw it away. There we go. So they're just going to let yellow have the house. All right, yellow throws a corner guard. Red is probably going to want to have one rock in play at least, so they draw one in. So now yellow has the opportunity to do a couple of different things. So we could think about drawing in, but eventually red is probably going to start peeling our guards and opening up those rocks. So if we want to have like score multiple points, we probably need to make sure there's at least one guard in play. So if we're in that situation, yellow probably wants to throw another guard. So there's a couple of options for that. They can either throw it on the same side, and this is kind of the same idea as the non-hammer team throwing two guards on the center line and trying to protect the rock in the forefoot. In this case, where like the high guard is protecting the tight guard, this high guard is now protecting the tighter guard and allowing us some time to get rocks behind it. And then red will be forced to try to make some peels, and then hopefully we end up at the end of the end, we have a rock on the wing, and maybe we can make a hit in the middle to score them both. So that would be the point of trying to throw a higher guard on the same side as the first guard. The other thing that teams will do is throw a guard on the other side of the sheet. And I think that the advantage of throwing to the other side of the sheet is that it avoids a situation where you accidentally like get your two guards very close. And if they're very close, it might open up the possibility for red to make a double peel, remove all the guards in one shot, and then yellow really has nothing to use to generate offense. So kind of in a way, this is a more conservative approach where we're going to just throw a guard on the other side of the sheet and make sure that red never has a chance to throw a double peel. So there is a disadvantage of throwing the rocks on opposite sides, which is that depending on where exactly those guards end up, they might be in the draw path to the button. So let's say we go all the way back. This gets into some thinking about like where do we actually want to be placing our corner guards. I think a lot of players kind of naturally want them to be sort of, let's say, covering the 8 foot, like maybe somewhere in here, because then there's a lot of space, there's a lot of rings that they can draw to and be behind that yellow one. The trouble with the rock placement like this is, let's say that red draws in on this side, and then maybe you throw another guard sort of level with the first one. The trouble is with the position of these two guards is that now there's really no paths into the button. So if maybe you can hit this red and you roll out, there's never going to be a way to draw into the forefoot, draw into the button area, and get yourself out of danger with the hammer shots. So this is actually, in my opinion, this is like a mistake for yellow to try to throw their corner guards tight to the center line like this. There is some personal preference here. If some teams like to be tapping these rocks, I think that taps are pretty difficult, precise shots. So my preference is to kind of try to cover maybe the edge of the 8 foot or even the 12 foot. And this has the advantage that although there's sort of less rings over here, the advantage is this is out of the way if I need to like draw to the button. There's probably space for me to come in here and not touch the guard and still manage to get into the forefoot, into the button. So a little bit of personal preference for how you like to play. Like what do you want to be covering? But there are pros and cons to kind of where you put those corner guards. Okay, so that's kind of the most aggressive situation for the Hammer team is set up 2 guards. Maybe red throws another one in the rings, and then yellow, they can think about like maybe a hit and roll one way or the other to try to get a rock underneath the guard and try to start to clean up the middle area. They can also maybe play a tap on these rocks, just push them behind the tee line, and then be able to use them to their advantage later. But then again, like hoping to sort of get some rocks behind the corner guards, draw a play away from the center, and set up a big scoring area for themselves. Okay, so that's aggressive play. That's aggressive play for the Hammer team. Let's start to think about playing more conservatively. And here we could have some, different approaches depending on what red does. But let's say red is being sort of moderately aggressive. They throw a center guard. We got to undo the shot that got thrown through. So red, maybe they throw a center guard. And yellow is interested in trying to score 2 points. So they're going to be, so if this is like sort of moderately aggressive, they're interested in scoring 2 points, but they want to start to play in the rings and get set up for those 2 points and give red some threat to worry about. They might just throw a rock to the wing on the tee line. People that have played with me kind of probably know that this is my like go-to shot with my first lead stone. Get one on the wing, make the non-hammer team at least think about this rock out here. They can try to play a draw toward the center and try to get a rock in position for the steal. But let's say maybe that rock hangs out. Maybe it doesn't fully bury. Maybe they come up light. Maybe it's like something like this. All of a sudden, I'm shot rock, and I got this big scoring area, and maybe even like if a rock is hanging out like here, I could play a hit on the red stone and sit 2. My rocks are going to be, in this case, my rocks would be like really far apart and be difficult for red to make it double. So red has to be careful. They need to make sure that they make that next shot, and because I already have a threat here with my first stone in the rings. So this would be considered a moderately aggressive play to play directly in the rings, but still playing to the wing. If yellow is trying to play very conservatively, try to see who's joining the call. If yellow is going to be even, say, more conservative, they might decide, okay, I'm going to forget about playing to the wings. I just want to make sure that red doesn't score or red doesn't get in a good steal position, and I'm going to draw right behind that center guard. Okay, so let's say yellow goes there. Now all of a sudden, red's guard is actually protecting a Yellowstone, and red's gonna have to do some work to move that out of the scoring area and try to get a red in a position to count. And they probably need to do it right away before yellow might throw another one in there. Yellow might start throwing guards and junking it up. So this is a conservative play for yellow. It's basically addressing red's threat of the center guard right away and trying to just beat red to the spot in the forefoot and not allow them to set up a good steal position. Now, all of that said, if that shot is made perfectly, that's great for yellow. Red's going to have trouble probably dealing with that. However, there is some danger to throwing the draw around the center guard, and that danger really becomes apparent if, say, you're a little bit deep. So let's say yellow is I mean, this is even just 2 feet heavy, which, you know, at our level, you know, being 2 feet heavy is like a pretty good result a lot of the time. However, now, like, we've just provided red with some backing behind their center guard, and if they get that next rock, like, let's say on the button or frozen to the yellow one, now it's going to be even more difficult for us for Hammer Team to get rid of that shot stone, and all of a sudden red is in like a super position to steal right away at the start of the end. So my suggestion, if you're trying to play moderately conservatively or conservatively and the non-hammer team throws a center guard, is you want to be in front of the tee line. You want to be in the rings even. We don't want to like set up a situation where, like, you know, put another guard in place that red could come around and like get a steal point set up early. So playing in the rings is good. But maybe erring a little bit on the lighter side would be better. I used to play with a skip who almost always after the non-hammer team threw a tight center guard, he always called for a 4 kind of off center with the offset with that guard, either on one side or the other. And this does a couple of things. So first of all, because red just threw that center guard, we think they're going to try to throw one, you know, they're going to try to draw around it and get themselves set up for a steal, right? So if we put a rock in this position, that's preventing them from throwing a draw on this side. So, you know, maybe they threw their guard this way. So you think, okay, they got that side of the sheet figured out. They probably want to throw their draw that direction too. Maybe we just get in the way and force them to play on the other side of the sheet into maybe a path they don't know, in which case they might miss. So one thing is, like, we're taking away a draw path and we know that red wants to play a draw. The second thing is that we have a threat here, like similar to having the rock on the wing. We have a threat. This is a rock in the rings. If it just, you know, maybe this will be a scoring point eventually. So red might even think about hitting right away. This is also in a good position to be raised toward the button. So let's say that red plays the draw around the other side and they get one in there. Well, this is a lot better than that situation that we had before, where we're thinking about having the Yellowstone on the wing, where we got to get around a guard and move this one out of the button area. Now we've got a rock that that's in the open, that's our own color, and we can raise that one toward the shot rock. And we don't even have to hit it necessarily perfectly and stick it right there, but we can use it to move this one out of that 4 foot, out of the button area, and give ourselves some space to get out of danger. So I really like this kind of play. If you're going to be moderately conservative with hammer, it's kind of a good, you know, in the Kevin Martin or Jamie Sinclair terminology, I would say that this is like a good probing approach where you're both playing. It's somewhat offensive, but it's also can be used for a defensive play to like run this back. So I really like this kind of approach to lead stones for hammer with a moderately conservative situation. Let's see. So I think that covers most of the lead stone situations. Does anybody have any questions before we move on?
I got a question.
Yeah.
So I've watched you play a couple of times, and I've noticed that lots of times you put your first stone in, when you don't have the hammer, into the top of the house someplace.
Yep.
And on exactly where that is, but so what is that accomplishing?
So what I'm trying to do, throwing, I often just call top house, and it kind of doesn't matter where exactly it is. I mean, maybe my ideal situation is a 5. So this is I guess this is like a probing strategy in a way. So what I'm trying to do is I'm giving the hammer team a bit of a threat. Like I have a rock in the rings. I'm covering up some of the button. A lot of times club teams want to play into the button area like right away, even if they have hammer. So if I'm in that spot, it's going to make it difficult for them to get in there. And even if they do, let's say yellow gets in here, I have a very short raise to remove that yellow one. So it's partly like covering up the scoring area. It's in some situations that might be a steal point, even like let's say yellow throws a guard. Maybe I just decide, all right, I'm going to throw a guard on top of it and make yellow have to outcount this one to score. And that's also like a reason on its own to throw one here instead of having 12 feet for rocks to fit into for a hammer team to score. Now they have less than 8 feet to fit rocks into. And a lot of teams, hammer skips, making the skip draw into the 4 foot to score a point. That's a challenging throw for kind of any skip, especially on our conditions with people that are very variable judgment of stones, variable skill of sweepers, all that kind of thing makes throwing a draw into the 4 foot difficult. So I'm kind of like putting a threat, shrinking the scoring area, and doing so in a way that's not getting me into any danger all at once. Any other questions?
I do have a question, but it's for something that happens after the lead stones.
Okay.
Do we have time for that right now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Can we assume that this is an kind of standard end where yellow has the corner guard and one behind it?
Okay.
Red has the center guard and one behind it as well?
Okay, so something like, all right, so yellow maybe throws a corner, red
Right. And then
does something like this. Yep. So both teams are playing somewhat aggressively. Yep.
Right. And then can we say red throws another one frozen onto the middle one?
The first one?
Yeah,
like that?
Sure. So as yellow, as the hammer team,
Yep.
you have to address this middle at some point, right?
Yep.
And you can do so by peeling that center guard.
Yep.
What's stopping? I mean, I guess what is stopping red from just keep putting it back up, right? Well, I mean, the end can just keep going like that, right?
Yep, that's right. Yeah, that's why, that's one of the dangers of this kind of approach for the hammer team, is that if red makes all the guards the rest of the way, they make 5 more guards, they're probably going to steal. So that's the risk that you take on when you play aggressively. Now, of course, the thing is, like, they got to make those 5 guards, and I know, like, I think that particularly players at our club often think that, like, making guards is routine, because our ice is not very swingy, and so there's kind of a lot of tolerance, and you kind of figure out the line to throw a guard onto one spot, and you can maybe make those guards at a really high percentage. On swingy ice, it can be really challenging to put a guard in a particular location, particularly left or right. So, let's say that. Well, let's go. Sorry, let's go forward. So let's say, red gets 2 in there, and now yellow is going to throw a peel. Let's see if I can actually make this shot using curling GG. Okay, that's kind of like a pretty good situation for yellow. They have another guard covering this one. All right, so now we'll go back to we'll just walk this down and say let's say that their red's rock over curls, and now these are open. Now yellow has a chance to hit and maybe roll the other way, and now they've got 2 rocks in the rings, and maybe one kind of lonely red in the back, and it's probably somewhat open. Red has got a lot to worry about then, and they assuming they're playing conservatively, they may start to hit, and that'll give even yellow a chance to deal with whatever red ones are in the rings, either by hitting or tapping or freezing and that kind of thing.
Okay, and so that's to say, yellow has to keep healing and hopefully wait for a slight miss.
Yep.
Or is running back that red an option as well?
It sure could be. Like, the pros would probably go and do that. Like, they will probably take aim at that 5 times, and eventually they're going to make it. We can play those shots too. The danger with runbacks is it's very easy to say, let's go back. Let's go back to, like, this situation. So, I made that peel and I was able to roll the shooter away. Let's say I tighten the broom a little bit, and maybe I throw normal instead of peel. So something like that could happen. Now life is worse, because now it's still two red in there, but now red is also throwing. The other thing that could happen is, like, you just squeak by the rocks in the rings, and you leave a guard there too. So you, like, again, you might not make the situation any better. So if you're going to take on the run back, you kind of, like, really need to commit to it. I think some people think, like, well, I'm going to try the run back, and if we miss it, then it's just a peel. That can be a dangerous game that you're playing, because they're really 2 different shots. It's either we're going to get rid of this rock, we're just going to peel it, and we're going to move along and hope for a slight miss, or we're going to commit and, like, we got to make this run back right now. And if we miss it, we might be in more trouble later.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. This is like another thing that the pros will do that, we can try, but it's a low percentage shot for us, just because we don't throw this shot very much, is Sometimes you can think about trying to run in the corner guard. I've actually heard that this is like a reason for hammer team to put their guards on opposite sides, is that if on the last shot they need some way to get rocks off the button, then they'll have a corner guard that they can slash in there and try to remove granite from the button. It's like it's a shot you see on TV. It's not the shot that I would want to play if I needed to win a game.
I do have one question. Yeah. I remembered. So what's your opinion on drawing behind opponents' guards? So like say they overcurl their center guard, and so now it's covering the flanks.
Yep.
And then I've played with skips that's like anathema to them to draw behind, because what if they run it back and take yours out?
Yep. So yeah, I mean, all else being equal, you'd like to draw behind your own guards, but it depends on the situation. Like if you are playing aggressively, or you need to be playing aggressively, it doesn't matter what color that rock is. It's a guard. I'm using it. Now, that said, we're talking about guards, right? Not like rocks in the rings. So, for example, let's say red's throwing first, and they're meaning to draw a top 4 foot on the center line, and they draw like over here. If I'm yellow, I'm not drawing behind that red one. Like that's right. Yeah, but this is a thing I've seen a lot of people do, is like, oh, okay, I can get behind a rock. Yeah. Yes, you could be behind that rock, but it's a short run back, and you're probably just asking for red to tap this one back and move your, get your red out of play. This does bring up like a good point. Like, there's still a way to use that red rock. Instead of going behind it, try to get in front of it, like either by freezing to it or even just being anywhere kind of near it. Now, if red is playing conservatively and they want to, like, if they're playing hits and they want to get rid of your yellow stone, now they have to navigate their own stone. So they put their own rock in play, and now all of a sudden it's working against them. This is, again, one of my favorite things, is to make the opposition regret putting a rock in play. Okay, so we can take some more questions, but I do want to get to one other topic. So let me stop sharing again, and then I will go back to share. Okay, so we talked about how to start the end. So I think that, the learning skip often kind of figures out quickly how to play the lead stones, and once you get to the end of the end, it sometimes becomes obvious, like, how to play the last couple of stones, because then it's just like, okay, I only need to plan ahead for a couple of rocks. But the middle of the end often, at least for me, this was like a really challenging part of the end to play. So, like, I have a slide here, like what to do when you don't know what to do. And this is where, whether you played the lead stones perfectly, whether both teams played the first stone, their lead stones perfectly, or not. Usually it's not, and then you're in a position that nobody's ever seen before, and there's no obvious answer. This is when it becomes really important to remember what your end plan or your end goal was. So did you come into this end trying to play aggressively or conservatively? And I always ask myself this question, like when I'm in a position that it's like unclear what to do. if I was trying to play aggressively and score in this end, I'm going to look for a draw that's helpful to my team, easy to make, or it's going to be annoying for the opposition. So that, and sometimes those things are like not intuitive unless you're just thinking like, well, I'm just going to play a draw. I don't, I'm going to throw hits out altogether and just try to put another rock somewhere in play, because I know that if I'm playing aggressively, I'm trying to score. If I have another rock in play, it's going to be easier to get a big score out of this. And often it's like I'm just asking myself, what's the easiest draw to make that's helpful for my team? And then conversely, if I'm playing conservatively, I want to look for a hit that, again, it's like either it's somehow helpful for my team, it's somehow easy to make. Maybe it's not even necessarily the best shot to call, but it's a shot that I know I can make, or it's like a routine shot. Or if there's a rock that's like making life difficult for my team, I want to hit that rock. It's usually not shot rock, strangely enough. It's usually some rock like a guard and it might be my own rock even, that's like preventing me from doing something else. So I'll just hit that rock and get rid of it, and hopefully that simplifies the position. And on the next throw that we have, it'll be maybe more obvious what to do. So the other way that you can approach this is, imagine that you're the other team, and what do they want to do next? And you can play a shot that takes the shot away from the opposition. So an obvious case would be, okay, the other team, I'm sitting shot rock. I think on the next throw, the opposition is going to want to hit that rock. Okay, well, I'll guard it. So I'll try to throw a guard. That's an obvious case, but maybe it's something like a combination of a yellow and a red, like in the one that we just saw. Maybe I'll just guard those two. Maybe it's getting to toward the end of the end, and I'm thinking that, well, eventually the skip is going to want to try to throw into the button area. I could throw a rock into the draw path. It's not even really guarding a stone, but it's just guarding a path. And I'm going to prevent the opposition from throwing the draw that I know they're going to want to play eventually. Another time where that kind of idea comes up is if you are the non-hammer team and the opposition has thrown a corner guard, and you don't necessarily want to draw behind the corner guard and draw play to the wings. You might just throw a rock into the draw path toward that corner position and not let them get a rock behind their guard. That's a way to kind of just be annoying. Another thing that I think people often can forget about is maybe there's a time where their opposition has a rock and it looks like it's in a very tappable position. The opposition can promote it. They know the path. It's clear behind it. All they need to do is throw the right weight, and they're going to promote their stone to the button and be in a good scoring position. I think a lot of times, particularly because we make guards quite routinely, is that our inclination be, well, I'm going to guard that. I'm going to guard the opposition tap. On our ice, that usually works pretty well. But on good swingy ice, you may just be throwing a guard and then allowing the opposition to draw behind both of those stones, and then you have no way of getting rid of that shot. So a lot of times the best thing to do is just hit that dangerous rock, get rid of it, and if you hit it on the nose, then you have a rock that's in the dangerous position, and the opposition might have to worry about that one. So those are like just a few kind of common situations that come up, and what you can do when you don't necessarily know what to do. So I threw in a couple of example situations. If anybody has like situations that they want to talk through, I'm happy to do that too. But I threw in a couple that I found in the strategy channel that were not semi recently. So here's a interesting situation. So red is going to throw. Red is down by a ton of points, but red does have hammer. And there's this bundle of yellows. There's all these yellow stones in the rings. So, if I was given the choice, do I want to be yellow or want to be red? I probably want to be yellow. I'm ahead by 4. It's the second half of the game, so yellow is in control of this game. But if I'm red and this end is playing out, I'm probably not sad about how the situation is shaping up. So there's also these two guards up here, red guards obscured by the red Tim Hortons cups. So there's a ton of rocks in play. So why might I not be completely upset if I was red in this situation?
Backing behind the T line.
Yeah, so there's backing behind the T line. So if there were a way to like somehow get a rock frozen to yellow number 4 there, yellow's going to have a hard time getting rid of it. So that's good. Any other thoughts here?
Is it because you at least have the two guards of your own color?
Yeah, so there's some guards. I probably can't use them right away. Like this is in this situation we're at the third stone. So if I just throw a draw, I'll be lucky to be 4th shot. I don't think there's any way to even be 4th shot and be behind a guard. But there are some guards. That's good.
Yellow rocks are close together.
Yep.
Meaning you could do easy doubles.
Yep. So these rocks, yeah, they're close-ish. So there's a good chance of making some doubles. Like if I just want to like start hitting, I could start hitting and like, maybe I end up rolling behind a guard. That could be good. So often the way that I try to play these kind of situations, if I'm behind by a lot, is I'm not trying to take out opposition stones at all. I want those opposition stones to be helping me. So what I'll do in this kind of situation is I'm going to ask my third to throw a backline weight probably in this case backline weight since there's a ton of rocks. Either tap the number 2 or number 1, and I'm going to push that rock behind the T line. Try to leave my rock in front of the T line and try as best I can to set up a wall of yellows in the back of the rings. Because if yellow is up by 4, they're going to want to be hitting my stones. And the thing that I want to do is I want to make it so annoying to try to hit my stones and remove them from play. So if there's a wall of yellow back here and I got like a red in front and they try to play the hit, there's a really good chance that they jam, leave a red one around, and now maybe I have a chance to like hit and roll under a guard, or I can tap another one back, reset the wall, make them throw another annoying hit. risk, like some hit with risk, and start to try to generate some offense again using the opposition stones. Like my first thought is probably not hitting, not removing yellow stones from play. Any other thoughts on this one? Okay, if not. So this is another example situation where red is ahead in the game. It's like midway through the game. Red is ahead. They don't have hammer. And it's getting to be the end of the end. So what might red be like trying to do here? What do people think like red's end goal was for this end?
Could be conservative if they're up by a lot, so maybe it's hit anything.
Yeah, they probably like ideally they want to give up, they'd be happy like even giving up 1 point, right? Like it's kind of their end plan is probably avoid giving up 2 points. And if they can hit everything, then they can prevent yellow from scoring 2 points and go on with the game with a nice lead and get hammer back and all that kind of stuff. If they score, even better, but even if they force yellow to 1 and take the hammer back with a 2 point lead, it's a good situation. Yeah, so I think that's right. Particularly we're getting toward the end of the end here. So what might red want to do here?
Does the does the shot rock being behind the T line mean anything significant?
Maybe. Yeah, I think it gives red an option for how to deal with the situation that they might not consider if the shot rock was in front of the T line. Like if that red and yellow were 2 feet higher and the yellow was like, yeah, the yellow was in a position where you couldn't like freeze to it and be shot, that might change things a little bit. I think in this so this is actually from a real game that I played, and this didn't really, the fact that it's behind the T line didn't come into play, but for certain players it could come into play. Anybody have a thought for what they would do if they were red here?
Maybe just somewhere close to the button. That yellow on the back it could be used as backing, correct?
It could be. So you think red should throw a draw?
I mean, it can be an option, right?
It could be an option. So Kenneth, you said you thought that red might be going into this end with like the idea to hit everything.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reason that you don't like any hits?
At this point, I mean, if I'm just speaking from what I'm seeing, I think I would just want to cut down the scoring area.
Okay.
I mean, whether that be coming on top of one of the yellows.
Mhm.
So I mean, in such a way that my next stone can't be easily removed.
Yep.
And that's why I brought up some rocks being behind the T line.
Yep.
So just thinking about seeing if there's any freeze that cuts down scoring area.
Sure. I think that's really, really good analysis. So I was the yellow team here, and so when I'm losing and I'm in a situation like this, if I'm like, a lot of times I'm looking for minor victories. So even if I get red to throw a draw in this situation, I'm happy. Now they may make it perfectly and I'll be sad. But if I can get them thinking about throwing a draw, I feel pretty good about myself. So I was as yellow, I was very happy with the way that this situation was lining up because I didn't see any obvious hits. So red's options for hits are they can hit the shot rock, in which case they're either going to roll away or they're going to jam on their own red and leave this one in play. Or even if they let's say even if they make the double, let's say they hit this one onto this one and we lose, yellow loses both of these, that probably means that the shooter is going to be out of play. And I'm going to have a hit on this one. This one will be left to shot rock, and I'll have a hit on this one and be sitting 2. And so late in the end, sitting 2 is a good situation. So I didn't think there was any good hits on the shot rock. So the next thing that red might thinking about is all right, well, I'm going to hit this yellow one in the back and sit there. Well, that's behind it. Let's say they hit and stick. So that's behind the T line. That means that as yellow, I could draw in front of it and maybe freeze to that one. And now I've got 2 rocks in the forefoot with 2 reds as backing. That's a good situation for me. Another thing they could think about doing was hitting this yellow and just rolling out and not leaving the backing, but they get rid of a yellow and they don't leave the backing. Well, then I can try to hit my own yellow, eject the red, and try to keep a bunch of yellows in play. And now I might be setting up for 3. So I thought that was hitting this one in the back didn't seem like maybe a good idea. And then the other thing that red could think about is hitting the top one, but that's 4th shot, and it leaves me with either a hit on the red. I can't remember who was second. I think that red was second shot. It leaves me with a hit on the red one to sit 3. Or I could just try to draw another one in and save that for later. So there was there weren't any good hits for red in this situation from my perspective. I think the best option for a hit for red was actually trying this long double, try to remove both this one and this one and leave yellow sitting 1. But even that, I can still maybe do something in here or draw and sit 2. And I should be setting up for multiple points. So this is a case where I tried to use the opposition stones against them. This one was there and I drew to it. I didn't even really move it. I just wanted to be frozen to it so that it would be hard for red to get rid of my yellow. And just figuring all right, later I'll deal with this. If I can, I'll deal with this later and I'll count this. Otherwise, I have a rock that's going to be hard to get rid of, and I'm happy with that. And this is I talked to the skip afterward, about, I think they tried to play like some kind of double on these two, and it didn't work out. And we ended up with a chance for 3. We didn't score the 3, but we ended up with a chance for 3. And so, like, I thought this was a good situation for yellow. Again, using the opposition stones against them, trying to make red think about playing a draw when they are ahead in the game. And let's say they come up super light, then I have a guard that I can maybe draw behind and like get another rock and play. So that's like a way that an end might play out into a random situation. And you know, based on your end plan, options. So we're at 90 minutes. I'll hang out and answer questions for anybody that wants to hang out. But I do want to give a plug to a variety of resources that I've used to pick up curling strategy over the years. The first on the list is this book by Gabrielle Coleman. I can't recommend it enough. It's like $4 on Kindle. It really works for me because it gives a lot of situations, offers options, and then talks through all the options. And then it gives the same situation with a different score and end situation, and like which rock is it in the end. And you think about like, how would I think about this differently? Even though the rocks are in the same position, I might think about like, do I need to be aggressive or conservative, and approach it differently. I love this book. I've read it several times and gone through it several times. Next is our various clinics that I've been to. First with Bill Shearhart, who Gabrielle drew quite a bit from. He now has a podcast called A Pane in the Glass. Some episodes are great. Some episodes are less good. He talks about a lot of the topics that we've talked about in these sessions, in addition to other things about shot making and technique and teamwork. A lot of stuff on teamwork. And then also, I've been to Kevin Martin's clinic twice. He goes through all of the options very systematically for what to do with lead stones in the pursuing, probing, and preventing or protective mode. He's also the kind of the best person at breaking down the curling delivery. So if he's ever in the States, and particularly on the West Coast, I highly recommend going to his clinic. It's expensive, but worth it. I've learned a ton by watching curling, both the Scotty and the Briar on TSN, and also the Grand Slam of Curling on Sportsnet. That costs money to watch, but it's like $25 for the year or something, and you can learn a lot by watching those guys. The curling simulator was created by Mikhail Samin, who he mostly plays in Oakland now. He has played in San Jose and Fremont at times over the years, and that tool is like really cool for if you have a situation and you want to think about a variety of different approaches and like see what happens if you throw a bunch of different choices, shot choices in the simulator, and see kind of like how things work out. It's really helpful. And then, of course, the last thing is talk strategy with your skip or opposing skips. Ask them why they did certain things. Ask them why they didn't do certain things. Say, hey, I was, I would have played this in that situation. Why did you think about that? Why didn't you think about that? You can also just go to a bonspiel, watch curling, especially at like some of the older clubs where they have a big warm room and people are just watching curling all the time. Look for the oldest people, sit next to them, and talk about all the skips decisions and see what they say. So a few people locally that I've learned a lot from have been TC, Gary Vandervalk, Tom Diaz. He doesn't curl too much anymore, but he was my skip for a long time, and he's the one that always put the rock in the 12-foot offset from the center guard. now I really like that. I really understand why he was doing that after sort of years later. So those are kind of the resources to find. And also, if you see situations in your games, maybe you don't want to spend 5 minutes thinking about them during the game, but have your phone available, snap a picture, post it on strategy channel on Slack, and generate some conversation there. So that's everything that I had prepared. If people need to take off, thanks for coming. Thanks for listening. If you ever want to talk strategy, I'm obviously open to doing so. You can tell I like talking about curling, I like talking about strategy. So feel free to reach out anytime. And I'll hang out here as long as people want to talk about any situations or topics.
It's really awesome, Jeremy.
Well, thanks for coming. All right, seems like we're going to wrap it up. Thanks again, everybody. We will post this on YouTube probably, and we'll send out the link. Thanks again.